Now, some of you might be confused because I made myself pretty clear in the last two videos that I think it's Martin that's going to die this Christmas in Eastenders. However, I've changed my mind because someone left a comment, someone who didn't want to be mentioned had another theory, and it was so much better and made so much more sense, and it linked everything together in like a nice bow, whereas Martin... Well, okay, I'll go into it. The problem I have with Martin being the one that dies this Christmas now is that they really seem to like bringing back legacy characters. They've brought back Alfie, Janine, Yulandi, the Fat Boy, Roxy in like flashbacks, and even Cindy after 20 years is now returning, or has now returned when she was thought to be dead. And so to kill off Martin, who was born in the year when the show started...
Welcome home, Albert.
Doesn't seem very likely. As well as, I also re-watched the episodes with the flash forward. And it really wouldn't make sense for it to be Martin because they are really suggesting that it's a villain, a male villain. Because just before it cuts away to the flash forward, Stacey says, or they have a toast saying, "May men get what they deserve." So Martin doesn't make much sense. But before I get into who I think it's going to be now, and trust me, it's good, we technically have two new suspects. First of all, with that flashback with Cindy being there when Lucy died, you get to see Fat Boy, and people are starting to theorise that Fat Boy is actually still alive somehow. I wouldn't put it past them, but just in case, I'm going to say they're a suspect. And also there's this Anton guy who was in like 2 episodes or something. I don't know if they're planning to bring him back or not, but I don't want it to turn out to be him and for him to show out of nowhere and I'll be like, oh no, I forgot about him. So I'm just going to say him so I don't forget about him. And he's also somewhat villainous, so maybe it's Anton. But enough of that. Who I think it's now going to be is James Wilmot-Brown, Kathy's rapist from the 80s.
Thank you very much. But I said no then, and I say no now.
I thought he was dead, but he's not. He's only assumed dead. And given that they brought back Cindy after actually being dead for 25 years, someone being assumed dead 6 years ago, you can bring them back. And you know how much the showrunner at the moment really loves bringing back old characters. You'd think they want to bring back an old villain as well, and I think James Wilmot-Brown is perfect for that. And as soon as this commenter suggested it, and I look back at the old episode, the first thing I notice is that every single woman of the 6 women, because for whatever reason in the first 2 parts I kept saying 5 women, I can't count, it's 6, definitely 6. For whatever reason, every single woman has a problem with a man. You have Stacey complaining about Ryan coming in Christmas. You have Linda complaining that Dean's going to come back, which I didn't notice. I thought he didn't make much sense, but if anything, they really, really imply that it's going to be Dean, with even Kathy saying...
And if that Dean does dare to show his face around here, you have got a wall of friends around you and make sure that he doesn't get anywhere near you.
If anything, Dean's the most likely person, and I feel stupid for not realising that. But anyway, you also have Suki with her husband. You have Denise with Ravi or Jack, depending on how you look at it. You have Sharon with Keanu. And then there's Kathy. And there's no man. Right? All the other 5 women have an issue with a man, that episode that they talk about, but Kathy doesn't. She just talks to Linda's about her. Well, I think the reason they've done that is because Kathy is going to have issues with a man, and it's not going to be Rocky or anyone, it's going to be James Wilmot-Brown. Okay, so the way I think they're going to bring him back is I believe that James is actually the father of Lola, the biological father of Lola, because we don't ever see Lola's dad on screen. He's only ever mentioned. And so I think it's very possible to write in a way where James is actually the dad. And this would like make her death even more tragic, because it means she did all that time trying to find her real mum, and all this time she didn't realise that she never even met her real dad. And I want to point out that the person who left this theory in the comments also said that they think that the mum isn't actually Emma, and that Emma's like an adoptive mother, and that the real mother is someone called Sarah, who was in the show in 2004 and was like a barmaid or something. And the reason they think this is because she looks like Lola, but I don't really see the resemblance personally. So that's the only part of the theory I disagree with. What I think would be more interesting if Emma was the mother of Lola, but she was raped by James. She was another victim of James, which would mean she'd get some sympathy from Kathy or whatever. The drama would really come from is that Billy would find out he's not technically related to Lola. It also solves a problem I have. Or unless someone can explain this to me, one confusion I've always had is that Ben is related to Phil and Lola is related to Billy, and Phil and Billy are related, right? So then, is this incest? I wasn't watching it when they had Lexi. Maybe they explain it better then. Still, even if it's like long distant relatives, I don't like the idea of Lexi being some incest child. I think it makes way more sense if James is the father, because it fixes that problem. It means Billy is no longer the granddad. And you could have a great story with Billy from that, about how that would affect him, finding that out after, not only have you lost her, but it's almost like she was never yours. So that's why I think the reason James is going to come back, because I think he's going to come back because he found out Lola passed away, and that's his motive for returning. But I also think there's going to be another twist, and this is one I have to give credit to the commenter for, because they said one way this can link to the new Knights family is if James is actually the mastermind as the reason why Cindy couldn't come home for the last 25 years, or the reason, she couldn't return to her girls once she left, and the reason she couldn't see her other family when Lucy died. And so now that's going to create more motives for people to kill him. And it could be like some big revenge plot on the Beals. Possibly. One final theory or twist I think could happen with this is that they very sneakily suggested in one episode that Rocky has a child with Joe, but then it turned out no, he was just talking about Jasper the parrot. Well, what if he was talking about a child after all, or that he did actually have a child with Joe? And not only that, but what if James is the current partner of Joe? Because I believe they suggested that Joe has a new partner now. Well, maybe it's James. And that would create issues for Kathy, because if Rocky's child sees his stepfather James as like their fatherly figure, then Rocky can't really get James out of his life. And so that would mean Kathy is stuck with James in her life unless she doesn't marry Rocky. And it's also been revealed that the actor that plays Phil is going to leave soon, maybe at the end of the year or something. And so this all seems to point towards Phil being the one who dies, and that bothers me. But I thought, what if, instead of it suggesting that he's the one that dies, what if he's the one that kills James, and that the reason he leaves is to he's doing a runner sort of thing? Because one issue I have with Phil is that he's like the most iconic character in Eastenders, and he's seen as this like hard man gangster, but he's never directly killed someone, at least to my knowledge. he's only ever done it indirectly, or like hired a hitman or something. And actually, that's a good point. I believe Phil was responsible for James's son's death. And so I think James will actually have a motive to harm Phil, and they meet in the pub on that Christmas, and Phil kills James. That's the way I see it playing out. And Phil would be there because I think it's going to be Sharon that Phil marries now. We saw recently that Kat wants to call off the wedding between her and Phil, which we kind of saw coming anyway. But what if Phil's actually going to be marrying Sharon, and he sees her with all her, bridesmaids, maybe that's what the other women are, and he goes in and kills James? That's my theory. But yeah, I'd like to thank the commenter who gave this theory because it's so good. And I'm now convinced it's James that dies this Christmas. The only flaw with this theory that I can see is that Jack currently has the cufflinks, and in order for James to be the one that dies this Christmas, the cufflinks would somehow have to go from Jack to James. And so what I think is going to happen, or my way of explaining this is, maybe since Rocky was the rightful person to win them from Nish back in that poker game, maybe for Rocky's wedding, Jack gives them back to him as like a little, wedding present, or, these are really yours, you can have them thing. And then Rocky has them on the side one day, and Joe comes back to stir more trouble, sees them, thinks they're nice and worth a bit of money, and steals them. And because she'd be the love interest of James, would give them to him. I don't think the theory is wrong just because James doesn't have the cufflinks yet. They can find a way of making him get them. But that's the only problem I see. But yeah, let me know if you think this is likely. Let me know who you think it's going to be. So yeah, that's it. Thank you.